Before we get into macOS 10, let's describe what an OS means. The OS is the operating system. The operating system is the one that manages the hardware. Let me explain it this way. When you buy a computer, you buy the hardware. And the hardware, usually it's made out of a number of components. The mouse, the keyboard, the display, the printer that you may have plugged into it, and so forth. Now, the hardware by itself really doesn't know how to connect to each other and how to work together. So on top of the hardware, we have to install an operating system, or the OS. The OS manages the hardware via software. What that means is that if it's software, that means that it could be written and replaced and updated and modified and changed. I'll give you a very simple example. If you have a Macintosh computer, if your hardware is a Mac, you could be running macOS 10, or you could also be running Windows on that same hardware. So in that situation, think of it as having two different operating systems. Actually, in fact, it's having two operating systems. Now, on top of the operating system, we have applications. So when you buy, let's say, Microsoft Word, you buy Microsoft Word for macOS 10, or you buy Microsoft Word for Windows. So it is specifically written for that operating system. Now, the operating system, apart from managing the hardware, it also connects between the applications and the hardware. So, coming back to the example of Microsoft Word, if you have Microsoft Word and you want to print a document, the one that does the management of the printing, it's the operating system. So from your application, from your Word application, you would send the document to be printed, and then the operating system talks and manages that document that you want to print to the printer itself. And at that point, the hardware is being managed by the operating system. So in a nutshell, that's what the operating system does. Now, how does that relate to you? Well, very simple. The operating system defines the way you interact between your applications and the computer and the hardware itself. So all of the windows, all of the interfaces, all of the menus, all of the dialog boxes, or most of the dialog boxes are actually managed by the operating system. And the idea is that you have a consistent interface, an interface that you get used to, and it's always the same regardless of what the application is. I'll give you a very simple example. If you pull down from a menu, in most cases, all menus are going to look similar to the one that I'm pulling right now, regardless of the application that you're in. And these menus are managed or are created by the operating system. Coming back to that example between Windows and macOS 10, when you pull down from a menu, it looks somewhat different, the style, the font, the color, to the one on Windows, even though it performs pretty much the same operations. So now that we have a basic understanding what the OS is, or the operating system, let's jump into macOS 10.